We're in hard times and some of us are going to need a lawyer. And if you need a lawyer, don't just react to a TV commercial. Get a copy of the Lawyers Consumer Directory, which is available absolutely free of charge at any 7-Eleven store throughout Central Florida. The Lawyers Consumer Directory is going to give you real hardcore knowledge on how to hire a lawyer and a lot of information on issues like bankruptcy, foreclosure, and more. Get the Lawyers Consumer Directory. It's absolutely free of charge at any 7-Eleven throughout Central Florida.
Hi, my name is Maribel Gonzalez, and I'm a family law attorney here in Central Florida.
My name is Ana Villas-Camani, and I'm the Proud External Affairs Manager for Planned Parenthood of Greater Orlando.
And this month, it is National Breast Cancer Month. What does that mean?
Well, basically, October marks, like Maribel said, National Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And so really the big part of that month is that we want everyone in this country to take their health very seriously and to take charge of their health and to be aware that breast cancer is a serious issue in our country and one of the leading cancers for women. And we want to make sure that women are proactive in their health care and getting those checkups to make sure that if they do have breast cancer, it's caught at an earlier stage.
What impact does Obamacare have on this issue?
That's a great question. So Obamacare actually makes a lot of preventative health care measures available to women without copay. And so what that means is that when you go to your healthcare provider, whether it's a gynecologist or organization like Planned Parenthood, you can use your private insurance, which you will be able to obtain in a really effective way through Obamacare to get those services that you need, such as a breast examination and then a more thorough mammography when you need that at a later time. And so having things like access to private insurance are going to make preventive care measures like things that will prevent breast cancer much more accessible to women across this country.
And what about if you don't have insurance? What happens to those
people? That's a great question. And unfortunately here in the state of Florida, we do not see Medicaid expansion come out of the Florida legislature yet. There is hope that it will happen again this year. So what that means is that there's going to be a group of individuals who are not poor enough to qualify for Medicaid but don't have enough money to afford a private health insurance plan even when the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare goes into its full implementation. And so there's going to be a hole of folks who don't have insurance, and organizations like Planned Parenthood are here for those type of individuals. I mean, we're the gap filler for those folks who really have nowhere else to go to. And so if you are in need of your yearly breast examination or woman exam, we would really encourage you to make an appointment with us at Planned Parenthood Greater Orlando, and you can not only have your breast examination but also a cervical examination and your pap smear, which prevents cervical cancer, for only about $115 without insurance. And then from that point forward, if you do have an abnormality, we can refer you to other organizations that can support you even when you don't have insurance.
There's been a lot of exposure with breast cancer, especially after Angelina Jolie did a mastectomy.
Yes.
As a female, even though that creates awareness, that's kind of a little scary because now here I am thinking, do I have to get a mastectomy if I find out that I have breast cancer?
Yeah.
Does everybody need a mastectomy, or can you talk a little bit with regards to that?
Well, every situation is going to be different, but 1 in 8 women in their lifetime will have an invasive form of breast cancer. That's what the statistics show. And for those of us who have breast cancer in our family, 50% of women who have breast cancer fall into that box. So they have a genetic history of it. And so every case is going to be different, and you shouldn't be scared what the outcome is. You should really just be concerned that your life is important. It's your life, and this is your opportunity to take care of yourself. And so even if there is some sort of risk involved with having breast cancer, the best step to take is to get checked. So that's caught early on.
That brings a good question. I have a daughter. I have a 8-year-old, and usually it's tailored to get a breast exam for older females.
Yeah.
What is too young?
Well, really, you're never too early to take charge of your health care. But I will say that if you're under the age of 40, you really, unless you have some sort of family history of it, you don't need a breast examination every year. It's really recommended every 1 to 3 years. But your healthcare provider can determine that number for you. But once you're over 40, you want to get that check every single year. Really until the age of 70 is how consistent that should be.
So we had to summarize. It is key. It is imperative that one gets checked.
Yes.
And then follow whatever the medical instructions are.
Definitely. And I would also really encourage you to self-check, right? And check your your breast, look for abnormalities. It might be something small, but you never know. And if you do detect a change, trust your instincts and come to an organization like Planned Parenthood where we can help you and provide you the information that you need to stay healthy and safe.
And every woman's different, everybody's different, every body type is different, so it's very important that you get checked out and see what is right for you and the right treatment for you.
Ahora puedes demostrar tu orgullo hispano mientras manejas en la carretera con la nueva tablilla o placa de auto hispana conmemorando los 500 años del descubrimiento de Florida por Juan Ponce de León.
Obtén tu tablilla hispana este año y harás la diferencia.
Nuestra comunidad se beneficiará con más programas y servicios.
Resalta nuestra cultura, nuestras raíces.
Hi, I'm Danny Ramos, and welcome to this week's edition of Hispanic Speak Out TV, brought to you every week for the past 13 years on Bright House Cable Networks. We've done, I think this is about our 658th show that we've done on Bright House. Before we get started, I want to show you our directory. This is the Lawyer's Consumer Directory. If you need a lawyer, this book is free of charge at any 7-Eleven store. It's in 165 7-Eleven stores throughout Central Florida. You just go in, pick one up, and there are great attorneys in here that you can call. There's attorney profiles and information about each attorney, so you're not making a decision in the blind. And all their contact information is right in there. So pick up a copy of the Lawyer's Consumer Directory. On the back cover, you have Brown and Rice. They're criminal defense lawyers. And on the front cover, you have Maribeth Gonzalez, who's a family lawyer here in Central Florida, and lots of other lawyers inside. So pick up a free copy at any 7-Eleven, absolutely any 7-Eleven out of 165 throughout Central Florida. It's free. Okay. I'm here with Tony Suarez and my co-host Jose Miranda, and we're going to do a little bit of talking about Puerto Rico, which seems to be in the news all the time. Tony, why don't you lead off?
Well, I mean, the latest incident, I think, it's interesting because it is emblematic of what's going on in the country. Recently, Detroit was in the news for mismanaging their affairs. Of course, they're saying that's because of the population fleeing, and the economy went down, causing Detroit.
Well, there was a car. They were a major car industry.
Well, yes, and that may partially, but Puerto Rico doesn't really have that defense. Puerto Rico is not at the point where the bond investors are not investing in Puerto Rico. It's near junk status, the bond ratings, and there's $7 billion in being held by just different groups. So there's a lot of money out there that's being held by investor groups, and they have stopped lending to Puerto Rico. The result of that is that Puerto Rico is now going to finance itself through short-term loans of the banks, which is really unsustainable because those interest rates are higher. The higher their interest rate, less money there is for anything else. But Puerto Rico has a systemic problem that their budgets are not only inflated, but their pension plans are only 97% underfunded. That means they're only funding 3%. All those people have been making promises to the if you work for the government, you get the pension, and everybody else who's done work for the government and who they owe money to is now in a position that they're either going to wait in line or Puerto Rico's near bankruptcy. And interestingly enough, Puerto Rico cannot do what Detroit has done because Puerto Rico is not covered by the bankruptcy law. Puerto Rico is not a state and it is not a city, and therefore is not under the current status. According to the Puerto Rican Constitution, they are not allowed to go not pay the debt. The priority has to be to bondholders. So what are they going to do? They talk about a shutdown. They will have to shut down Puerto Rico in order to just pay debt. This is a very serious situation, obviously, for Puerto Rico. It's very serious for all the pension funds that have invested billions of dollars into Puerto Rico, with at this point, not sure that they're ever going to get paid.
Well, let's go back for a second. Is this an historical issue, or we're talking about more modern times? If Puerto Rico was set up on the concept of the American government helped set it up, all right, did we help initiate the first budgets and stuff like that?
Well,
how were they paid?
Yeah, remember Puerto Rico was invaded in 1898. Right. It was totally controlled by a military governor. And then they had a civilian governor. And then in 1952, they allowed themselves to have a constitution for the territory. And they call themselves an unincorporated state or unaffiliated state, free associated state, all sorts of names for the territory. But bottom line, it's not a state, and therefore it's not covered by the same rules as the rest of the states. So they have to run, they can run their own state government, and they issue bonds. And interestingly, because they're a territory, their bonds are triple tax exempt. So when you buy a bond, a Puerto Rican bond, not only is it exempt from taxation in the state, it's exempt from federal taxation. So that's why it was become so popular. But the result is that now, because of this political status and because of the way the bankruptcy statute is written, Puerto Rico is not included. It's not a municipality. It's not included within the Chapter 9 of availability that for municipalities that Detroit could take advantage of. So right now they're going to have to look up for literally a handout to see whether the federal government is willing to loan them money directly, which has never been done. And I don't know, in the environment that we're under today, where we're fighting about paying our own bills, I doubt that Congress is going to want to give money to Puerto Rico, who has been historically been a problem with it. They have like 17 holidays. Everyone's on their own vacation all the time. The legislature.
Wait. What are you trying to say? wait. How are you going to make that comment?
There's a reason why Puerto Rico is one of the happiest places to live in.
Nobody working?
Nobody's working? What are you saying?
Well, we all know how many vacation days. These guys really have an exorbitant number of vacation days that close during the year. And their legislature, for a territory that only has 4 million people, they operate full-time. Florida has 17 million people and only operates 3 months of the year. The legislature.
Actually, they're not operating at all. So.
But Puerto Rico is a full-time legislature, and they get, the salaries are $120,000 for a state senator, and they get exorbitant rights for car and drivers and phones and stipends, and I don't see how the federal government is going to give them a bailout. On the other end, I don't see that they're going to want to let Puerto Rico go under, because it's going to affect so many other pension plans over here. But
don't you have a lot of Latinos or Puerto Ricans that have come from New York and the States have moved back to Puerto Rico so that they can enjoy their pensions and their later times of their life?
Actually, Jose, the population of Puerto Rico has dropped in the last several years. It went from 4 million to 3.7 million. Population has actually dropped. Okay. So the demographics are changing on the island, and they attribute that, from what I've read, in fact, the conversation I had with the former governor, Romero Barceló, he confirmed that number. I checked that in the Census Bureau. The statistic came out the other day, and they attribute it to crime, they attribute it to the economy, lack of opportunity on the island. They've got 3 law schools, for example, on the island. Right. And where are all those lawyers going to go? And, it's hard for the population to absorb.
Well, crime is rampant in Puerto Rico. Drug crime is rampant in Puerto Rico.
Crime is high, and so that is also security is a big question. But what we have here, I think, what the biggest story, because not everybody out there cares about Puerto Rico or has some relationship to Puerto Rico. I think the story here is how government can run amok and can spend so much money that it cannot spend. It doesn't make enough money from taxes. Cannot tax it. Puerto Ricans are very highly taxed by the local government. But the story is that governments who tax and spend and cannot keep up ultimately go into a state where they pay and take care of nobody. And I think that's a lesson the federal government has to take into it. Detroit, Greece, they're all in that way.
Aren't we headed that way with all the entitlement programs that we have? And
I think that is
a big question of the Obamacare.
Exactly.
We're adding 30 million people to
bottom line, Obamacare is another entitlement program. It's a great idea to give people who don't have health care an opportunity to have health care. The problem is, we don't have the money for this. Who's going to pay for this? So that you'll have to raise taxes or keep borrowing. I don't know. I'm not an economist.
It falls on the middle class, though.
Well,
because the plan was to have young people buy into the system. Is to have a young person coming in their 20s or early 30s. They would pay between $2,000 to $4,000 a year to buy health insurance, and they wouldn't get sick. It's the older folks that get sick unless it's catastrophic. Right. So young people would be paying the way for the seniors or the 50-plus people. But a young person, instead, because he's going to be healthy, he's the invincibles, they call them, right? They're invincibles. He's not going to pay $4,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 a year.
Well, he's going
to pay the $95 penalty and say, if I got to go to hospital, I'll pay cash. It'll probably be under.
But somebody has to pay. Who's
the middle class?
Somebody has to pay. So
you tell me.
You're saying not to insure the 30,000 people, 30 million people, just to tell them what.
I think that the whole thing is totally corrupt. I remember when I was a young man. And I was sick. You know, the doctor came to my house, and it was before insurance. Doctors actually made something called house calls. Now, today, you get a house call, impossible. Why? Because the insurance companies have grabbed all the doctors, they own everything, and today...
But that's not the government. The insurance company is a business.
It's a business, and they have grabbed and they've cornered the market. And so what I would like to do is get our insurance companies totally out of it and see whether or not we go back and see also those prices come down. Because all this plan to help Obamacare, basically to have more people on the plan and create more premiums and more money, has nothing to control the costs. If you don't control the costs of health care, the premiums are always going to go up, no matter how you have the plan. So that's where, and the only way to control the cost is to have the actual free market, not a controlled market, which is what basically the insurance companies have done. There's no competition. They own everything, the insurance companies. And today you go into the hospital.
But isn't that,
guys,
aren't we in a country about...
Excuse me, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back because we're getting a heated discussion about Obamacare. First Puerto Rico, now Obamacare. We'll be back in a couple of minutes after a commercial break.
Ahora puedes demostrar tu orgullo hispano mientras manejas en la carretera con la nueva tablilla o placa de auto hispana conmemorando los 500 años del descubrimiento de Florida por Juan Ponce de León.
Obtén tu tablilla hispana este año y harás la diferencia.
Solo 1,000 se necesitan para hacerla permanente.
Su donativo ayudará a estudiantes con becas.
Nuestra comunidad se beneficiará con más programas y servicios.
Resalta nuestra cultura, nuestras raíces.
Demostremos que en la unión está la fuerza.
Obtén tu tablilla hispana en el Departamento de Vehículos de Motor más cercano o llama hoy al 321-277-0850.
Welcome back to Hispanic Speak Out. My name is Danny Ramos, and we're here with Tony Suarez, well-known attorney, Central Florida, and Jose Miranda, my co-host. And we're talking about the financial crisis in Puerto Rico and also the effects, a little discussion about Obamacare and how that's going to affect us going forward, how it's going to affect the United States economy going forward. Go ahead, guys.
The Affordable Care Act was designed to include 30 million people, give them a shot at it. However, on
an additional 30 million people.
An additional 30 million. But on the flip side of that, with a Republican hat on, I would say that I'm in the business of making money. So if I own an insurance company, isn't it my due diligence to make as much money as I could possibly get up my wazoo?
Right. Well, you have an obligation to your stockholders. Stockholders make as much money, and what cures the market is competition.
Right.
So if we ensure that there's competition, then you gotta make as much money as you can within the marketplace. Otherwise, the other guy will take all your clients from you. So you gotta keep your prices low in order to keep the person, and that means you control the cost.
But we also have the insurance companies that control everything anyway. And there is right now, the insurance companies exist without the cuchifrito on the side. You know, there's another market that's saying, look, I have this insurance. It seems to be under one umbrella, so they pretty much control it. Are you saying they should be like AT&T in the beginning and just break them up?
And break them up. That's what Teddy Roosevelt, the Sherman Antitrust Act.
Okay.
We have existing law to stop conglomerates from getting so big
that they dictate
the market, control and pervert the market. And
so
I think that's
do that with banks too.
We can do it with banks, and we can do it with, and we should do it with banks. They gotten to the point where they're too big to fail. Exactly.
Okay.
We went through that with banks already.
So you're saying one sure way to solve this and make the program more solvent is to break up the insurance companies.
Break up the insurance companies, make the competition, tell them you can't have any more. I don't know. We'd have to find a way. You have to give this a thought, but find a way to break it down so they don't control the market. Today, You go into any of the hospitals here in Central Florida, and you will see mansions. It used to be a hospital was kind of Spartan, you know. You go into the hospital. Today, they are marble floors and 30-foot ceilings and
pianos.
I mean, yes, my God, it's an incredible. Where's that coming from? Money, and money that's coming from these premiums and basically.
So why isn't
costs.
that marble floor going to help instead of having a marble floor, instead of having a grand piano in the lobby? Why isn't that well, you've been there. So why isn't that money going to help poor people?
Well, in a way it does, because they are required to take care of the poor people. So,
yeah,
if someone goes into the hospital and has no health care, then
they are required to take care of the poor people, but they send them a bill, and then if it's not paid, they send them a collector, and they go after
then they go pass it to the federal government.
Yeah.
So that's how they really do it, because basically the federal government covers all those uninsured. The federal government picks up the tab.
So if you're able as a Republican, I'm not trying to hold that against you, but if you're able to sit here and decipher that the way to get this done is to break the insurance company up, why hasn't that been put forward?
Well, I think that probably, unfortunately, you know, as you know, there are 1,000 lobbyists. I mean, for every legislator in Washington, about 5 or 6 lobbyists, and half of them are all lobbying for healthcare insurance companies. So we have the other problem.
Lobbyists should be complete. In my opinion, outlaw lobbyists. They are the biggest burden on government.
But you know, listen, it's called the First Amendment.
No, but it's called, it's got freedom of speech, right? But that freedom of speech, takes away the freedom of speech of the constituents. So a politician, because he's getting money from lobbyists, his decision-making process is tainted by the lobbyists. Right. I've seen it up front in Florida.
No, it should. There's no question.
You know, somebody walks in there and says, you know what, I'm going to give you $50,000 for your campaign. Come on in. Right. While the guy who's his constituent is sitting out there for 4 days waiting to have a conversation with him.
Well, that is true, and you know.
Turning back to Puerto Rico, it used to be a tax haven for a lot of American corporations, and they used to flood to go down there.
Right.
Now they flee.
Yeah, in fact, one of the proposals, the president of the Puerto Rican Senate, Eduardo Batia, was just recently in Washington and in New York trying to convince the investors to go back and lend money to Puerto Rico. Okay. And he was in Washington attempting to reinstitute a rule or law that was favorable for Puerto Rico and then was done away with about 15 years ago. And that is that American corporations who have a subsidiary in the island, that their profits will be tax-free. So they're trying to do that and trying to bring that back.
So that was illegal.
It's considered unfair. Okay. It was unfair to the rest of the United States of America. And so Puerto Rico had a distinct advantage. They get rid of it. Now they're looking back.
Is that like sheltering your money?
That's like sheltering your money, exactly.
But, Puerto Rico can't compete with China. They can't compete with Mexico because, Puerto Rican labor is still within the American marketplace. Mm-hmm. So your Puerto Rican wants his $12, $15 an hour, no matter what, in manufacturing. Well, all these companies that have left the United States, like Colgate and Hoover and all of these manufacturers, they've all left the United States to pay 75 cents an hour someplace else. You can't compete with that. No matter what Puerto Rico does, it could never compete with China. We're buying our toothpaste from China.
Yeah, but that's why Puerto Rico, like every other state of the Union, has to find a way of making a living. So we don't all give up. People have evolved. They now become software. And now everyone is playing games in America because we have the highest software manufacturers for, simulation technology in the world. We are going higher in intellectual property than we are in the hardcore mechanics and stuff. So we let Mexico make the cars and put the bumpers on, and we develop the software systems in the car, and so that's how we have evolved, and every state has to find a way. Puerto Rico has to find its way.
Is Puerto Rico considered, for lack of a better term, almost like a third world country at this point?
It's it's in that direction.
My personal point of view, since Puerto Rico cannot vote for president in the United States, and the Puerto Ricans on the island do not have representatives, to me they're third-class citizens, or at least second-class citizens, because you can't. To me, citizenship, the essential point and fundamental right of citizenship is to vote and participate in democracy. Puerto Ricans do not have that. So to me, that's a That's a big problem.
You think if they participated, it would make changes here?
Yeah, of course.
Radical changes?
Imagine if you have one United States senator can hold up the entire budget of the federal government. So imagine if you had 2 federal government senators coming out of Puerto Rico, they would have tremendous leverage on getting increased funding for Puerto Rico, which they cannot do now.
Give me a doomsday scenario.
For Puerto Rico?
It fails. We can't pay our bills, man. You know, what happens?
You're talking about Puerto Rico?
This is what I think. I think this is what's going to happen. What could happen? Okay, doomsday. This federal government comes in and says, like they've done with Detroit, they put a master and say, we're suspending everything of the Puerto Rican Constitution. You will now have to follow the dictates of this master who's going to control the budget, and then you're going to see real hell break loose on the island, because now the politicians, free from taking responsibility for making necessary cuts, will blame everything on the supervisor coming from the federal government, and all of a sudden the 2% of the Independence Party will become boom, because that gives them the right to say, see, because of this federal government, now you don't get your pensions. Because of the federal government, now you're not getting your food stamps.
So are you saying that'll drive independence?
Well, he asked me for a doomsday scenario. Yeah. My doomsday scenario.
Worst case scenario.
That would be the worst case scenario. The federal government has to, no choice, because they can't pay, Puerto Rico cannot pay its bills, appoint someone to manage Puerto Rico's affairs, just like Detroit has someone.
That would be a revolution.
Then you have revolution.
That would be a revolution.
That's your worst case
scenario. Because Puerto
scenario.
Ricans will not stand for that.
Exactly.
They won't stand for that. They won't allow the federal government to come in. There'll be violence. That happens, there'll be violence in Puerto Rico. There's no question.
Is there an issue where the United States
Not that there isn't violence now.
There's crime now. So what happens if the United States says, well, we're not even going to send in a supervisor? I mean, you're in total.
What will happen if it is a Puerto Rican politicians are forced?
We can't even agree on toothpaste in the Senate now. In the House.
Right.
So we can't help ourselves. We definitely can't help Puerto Rico.
Right.
So what?
So let's assume that they say,
the Republicans say,
take care of yourself. No, you got to take care of you're on your own. Well, then the Puerto Rican politicians are going to have to face up, and they're going to have to say, okay, guys, we're laying all of you off. We're not paying you your pensions. The police officers have to go, and then we'll have a whole bunch of money. Remember, Puerto Rico, almost 50% of the GDP of the island comes from government operations. So when the government closes down, you're going to have not 14% unemployment. You're going to have 35% unemployment on that island, and then you're going to have mass exodus of people coming over here. And I don't know what's going to happen in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, they'll be headed to Orlando. They've already started. There's a big migration coming in from Puerto Rico to Orlando, and it's continuing to grow over the past. You've seen it. We're part of that. It's continued over the last 5 years now, and Puerto Ricans are growing tremendously in Central Florida.
The scenario is terribly frightening.
We only got 30 seconds.
Okay.
Go ahead, hit
it. I think it's incumbent that the United States, in its entirety, get its act together. So we won't have to face that.
It's all about budgeting and biting the bullet.
I think that's important. I think that's the message. That's why I was excited about your invitation to talk today about the budget and the shutdown and so forth. It's time the government and government officials stop running on platforms that say, I'm going to give you something, because that leads us into impossible situations.
We're going to have to cut it there. This is Hispanic Speak Out TV. We will see you next week for more information about the Hispanic community in Central Florida. Thanks, Tom.